If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 10 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that 2 dirty bombs, or possibly a suitcase nuke, will explode in Manhattan, New York City on March 22nd, 2025. There will be a large-scale evacuation from Manhattan Island. Martial law will be declared in the U.S. I am predicting that on April 26, 2025, Israel will bomb, possibly with nuclear bombs, Iran's nuclear and energy weapons facilities. It is also possible that the U.S. will also bomb Iran alongside Israel on April 26th. I am also predicting that a nuclear bomb will be detonated on June 8, 2025. It is possible that April 26, 2025 is a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that Israel will bomb Iran on June 8th. It is also possible that June 8th is also a step in the trail of signs leading to another date in the future on which Israel will bomb Iran and a date on which a nuclear bomb will be detonated. If that is the case, we can expect clear and relevant prophetic signs to occur on April 26th and June 8th. It is predicted that on June 9th, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons, and it is possible that June 9th will be the day Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. At some point, there will be a massive Mary apparition that will deceive the masses, because all Mary apparitions in history have been demons pretending to be Mary. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist, and 5G frequencies. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. If June 9th is not the date for these events, there will be a relevant prophetic sign or prophetic signs, which will make June 9th a step in the trail of signs leading to the date of the symbolic beginning of these things. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. It is predicted that on August 6th, 2025, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River for over 100 years will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. The reason for this is that Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, symbolic of Noah's Ark. Niagara in the native language means straight, narrow way, and Niagara's Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the CN Tower in downtown Toronto, because Toronto and its tower are symbolic of the Tower of Babel. In a game of horseshoes, the object is to aim the horseshoe and throw it at the metal stick, which is why the Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the metal stick that is the CN Tower. God is communicating that as testament for those who will live in the 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, the geography of North America will, as a result of a massive earthquake, be divided by a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. This destruction will be judgment on America and Canada for attempting to divide God's land, Israel. When this happens, the water in the Great Lakes will spill out over southern Ontario and Toronto. I am predicting that a solar flare will erupt on the surface of the sun and send a coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth on August 13th, 2025. Which will knock out America's power grid and will lead to food shortages. The hit of the coronal mass ejection, predicted for August 13th, that will knock out the power grid will also knock many planes out of the sky. I am predicting that on August 30th in the North America time zones and on August 31st in the Asia time zones, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. The asteroid will also trigger a mega landslide on Hawaii Island that will trigger a mega tsunami that will hit the West Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. She will stack the Supreme Court, and she will appoint Barack Obama as her vice president, and then she will step down, making Barack Obama the 50th president. This is speculation, but it could be that there will be a movement to make Trump the president for a third term, arguing that he is eligible because he hasn't served 2 consecutive terms. And if so, this will backfire, as it will lead the way for Barack Obama to serve a third term that isn't consecutive. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. Unless there are multiple rapture events, the resurrection rapture event will not occur before Pentecost on June 4th, 2028. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Make a note right now of these alternative platforms that you can find me on, in case you can't find me later. All right, welcome. This is a continuation of this email that I'm reading regarding the reasons for how it is known ahead of time that 2 dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan on March 22nd, 2025, and there will be a large-scale evacuation. As we can see here, this email was composed on March 8th. All right, March 8th. Of course, the date that this video is posted on the platform you are watching it on, it proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. But if for some strange reason you are still skeptical, email me and I'll forward to you this email. So let's begin here where we left off in the last video. It would be ideal to watch these videos in the order that I'm making them. So on June 18th, 2023, the Ocean Gate submersible imploded near the Titanic wreck. The top news headline for the following 4 days was how there remained 4 days of oxygen left for those in the submersible. The implosion 900 miles from Cape Cod on June 18th, 2023 is 4 times 44 0.4 times 4. If you want to know what that is, it's 176.16. But 176 is 4 times 44, and 16 is 4 times 4. And again, this story about the submersible were the 4 days of oxygen that the people trapped in the submersible theoretically had. And so this was the race against time to find the submersible. That was the story. The race against time, but the time limit was 4 days. And again, this date we are talking about with this implosion, which is symbolic of an explosion, occurred 4 times 44, 0.4 times 4% of a calendar year before the predicted explosions and evacuation from Manhattan Island. Also, God pairs 9 and 44 together to confirm his signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 44. And then I know this because I've been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And the reason is the 44th president was inaugurated in 2009. And the reason why that is, why God would pair 9 and 44 for that reason, is because the primary, or one of the primary reasons for his end time signs is to identify the Antichrist. I mean, it's to say that it's redundant and overdone isn't even close to the truth. I mean, he just does it over and over for years and years and years now. And that's because, although it's like a tool. It's like a key, if you will, unlocking more mystery. The foundation, the basics, is that Barack Obama is the Antichrist. But like I'm explaining in this particular paragraph, we use this tool, this symbolism, these numbers paired together, to unlock more information, such as, for example, the date it's predicted that the dirty bombs will explode. This is how it works. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. Okay? Obama, God is using to hint at Obama. Many reasons for that, which I can't explain in this video. But that's what we're talking about here. We're talking, and the reason for the 9 and 44, how we get the 9 and 44 here, is the story of it being the search near the Titanic being 900 miles from Cape Cod. Well, that's extremely irrelevant because we are talking about the Titanic. Why is that relevant? Why is the Titanic relevant to Cape Cod? The newly released images of the Titanic in 2023 show clearly that the big serial number on the giant propeller, there's only one propeller, the big number is 101. And that is because of something that was intuitively known before even this confirmation, that the sinking of the Titanic on its maiden voyage was a prophetic sign from God that pointed to the maiden voyage of the Pilgrims, in which 101 passengers arrived and anchored on the date 11/11 in 1620 at Cape Cod. And that's the spiritual founding of America that God is pointing to. There's a lot to that story regarding the Pilgrims, and I've gone through it a number of times on this channel many times. It's from everything from their anchoring in the Mayflower Compact, their escape from religious persecution from the King of England, their crossing the Atlantic to the New World as being analogous in their minds to the Israelites escaping the persecution from the king of Egypt and crossing the Jordan River into the Promised Land. And we also have the coincidence of Plymouth and Plymouth Rock, because in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. The coincidence being, the Mayflower had to return 2 times. It departed England 3 times. It returned to Plymouth, England twice because its companion ship, the Speedwell, sprung leaks. Many believe it was sabotage. So they left Plymouth. They got their land deed from a company named Plymouth, completely unrelated to the city Plymouth, where they had to go back to fix the Speedwell. And then when they arrived, they chose the area that was already named a few years earlier by a cartographer that had been to the area named Plymouth. And they weren't supposed to be in Massachusetts. They were destined for Virginia, but because of the 66 days they took because of the storm, they got blown way off course. 66 is the 11th triangular number, which is more a hint at the 101 passengers. But returning back to the Mayflower, getting off track there, the Mayflower is a ship on its maiden voyage that was deemed unsinkable. It was an example or symbolic of man's hubris and sin, and this is what God used to point to a judgment warning for America. Way back in 1912, America was steering off course and in the process of rejecting God. Now it's way off course and it's about to be destroyed. But you can see that you can also see, though, that God was laying this prophetic sign for our time, because we have this ocean gate submersible bringing the Titanic prophetic sign into our current time, which precedes shortly before the destruction of America as promised. And what do I mean by promised? Well, because John Winthrop, before he and the Pilgrims departed their 11-ship flotilla, and the founding of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, delivered a speech that was derived from Deuteronomy 28 and 29 regarding God's promises of blessings and curses for the Israelites before they went into the Promised Land, depending on whether they would obey God's commandments or not. The reason for the 11s in all of this is because the number 11 is symbolic of a reflection. 2 lines. It hints or symbolizes the reflection the contrast between God's promises of blessings and curses. Incidentally, John Winthrop lived on Governor's Island, the first governor, and that today is Logan Airport, from which Flight 11 departed on 9/11 and flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11. The Twin Towers were a reflection of each other, which was symbolic of what I just said, the contrast between the promises of blessings and curses. That was in the 11th state, and Flight 11 had a crew of 11. New York City is made up of 11 letters, and on and on. And Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness. And in English is an idiom that means last chance, time is running out, as in time is running out for America to repent and turn back to God. Now, speaking of Flight 11 that flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11, the second plane hit 17 minutes later. That's because the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart were in fact pointing to the two space shuttle disasters that were almost exactly 17 years apart. In fact, they are commemorated on the same calendar date every year because of that. The two space shuttle disasters were exactly 17 years apart, and the first mission to the moon was Apollo 11. So it was Apollo 11 followed by the two space shuttle disasters 17 years apart, which is a parallel with Flight 11 and the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. Why is God pointing to Apollo 11? Apollo 11 was the first mission of Americans to reach the moon, and the moon is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolic of Jesus. It in fact points to Plymouth Rock and the 101 passengers. Apollo 11 and the mission to the rock points to the 101 passengers that stepped off onto Plymouth Rock, because Plymouth Rock is symbolic of Jesus, on which America was founded. America was a nation of God's disciples from the beginning. There were only two nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with the God of the Bible and the Bible: Israel and America. And Apollo 11 was the first mission to the moon. Moon symbolizes rock, which symbolizes Jesus. And also the sun symbolizes God the Father, whose light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze off the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And also, this is why watching for the timing of the moon in the Bible is important, as it also symbolizes the watching of the timing of the Lord's return through his signs, which include moon signs. But the last American to depart the moon was in Apollo 17. The last American to depart the moon is symbolic of America's departure from Christ. So we have Apollo 11 and Apollo 17 being the bookends of the space shuttle or the space missions to the moon. And that's again why Flight 11 and 17 minutes later, the following plane that struck the second tower, which provided a second witness confirmation that it was judgment from God. Because once the first plane hit, the world looked up and was in confusion as to whether or not it was an act of terrorism or an accident. But then, as the world was watching, it looked and observed live and in shock and horror as the second plane struck the second tower 17 minutes apart, which pointed to Apollo 17 and America's departure from Christ. Okay, so I really went off onto a tangent. I love it, though, and so that's why I had to do it again. This is what the Titanic means. That's why the serial number is 101. It was a voyage from the old world to the new world paralleling, pointing to the voyages of the Mayflower and the 11-ship flotilla of John Winthrop's. Now, one more thing. What was recently discovered is that 9/11 was exactly 4,570 months after the Mayflower anchored at Cape Cod, 900 miles away from the Titanic. So the Mayflower landed at Cape Cod on the date 11/11 in 1620, exactly 5,470 months before 9/11, and 547 is the 88th prime number. That's amazing beyond words, because on 9/11 there is the number 88. There is the famous, and this was known prior to this discovery, that God was pointing to the number 88 through the events of 9/11. On 9/11 there was the famous story of the heroes of the 88th floor. There's a documentary on that if you're interested. Also, the Tribute in Light art installation that commemorated the Twin Towers was made up of 88 searchlights. Through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington, and according to Wikipedia, there are 88 places in America named Washington. And on 9/11, Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, because in archaic English, the word trump means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. And before the walls of security collapsed on Jericho in the Bible, in God's judgment, the Israelites blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed, and that's why trumpeted into Channel 9 News TV station on 9/11 and inadvertently trumpeted how his tower on Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan after the collapsed buildings, as in the walls of security that collapsed on Jericho. Anyway, the word Trump and the name Trump are equal to 88 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Also, the planes that struck the towers on 9/11 were headed towards California, and California also equals 88 in simple English gematria. That's why the 88th prime number of months between 9/11 and the spiritual founding of America, because again, that's what God pointed to through the 9/11 events with Flight 11 from Governor's Island, where the governor lived who led the 11-ship flotilla. But before they departed the ships, he delivered the speech derived from Deuteronomy 28 and 29 regarding God's promises of blessings and curses. Washington was inaugurated on Wall Street, and then President Washington marched down Wall Street and into Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings. In other words, it would be cursed, which is what temporarily happened on 9/11 as a warning. Just like the warning to the Israelites in Isaiah 9:11. Which involved uprooted sycamore trees. It was a uprooted 70-year-old sycamore tree that protected the chapel that Washington was in, which made that chapel be the only building at Ground Zero to survive without even a broken window. It survived, the only building at Ground Zero to survive, and it did so without even a scratch because of the 70-year-old sycamore tree. It's today nicknamed the Miracle Chapel, and outside the chapel today there is a 20-foot high bronze statue of the roots of the tree commemorating the tree that saved the chapel, which points to Isaiah chapter 9:11. It's the same type of tree that is uprooted in Isaiah 9:11, the warning after the ancient Assyrians, the world's first documented terrorists, raided the northern kingdom, which is, by the way, why the North Tower was struck first, because there was two kingdoms in ancient Israel, the north and the south, as in the North Tower and South Tower. And when the Israelites didn't heed the warning, both kingdoms were destroyed, which is why America is now about to be destroyed. But back to what I was saying here. Before the evacuation of the Titanic and its sinking, it was on its way to Manhattan Island. We are talking about a predicted evacuation from Manhattan Island. So the Titanic story is about an evacuation. That's also why this is being used to point to what's being predicted. Because there was an evacuation on the Titanic. Now, this 4 times 44.4 times 4% of a year connection between the submersible and the Titanic that was on its way to Manhattan Island and the predicted explosions in Manhattan is also 643 days. Okay, so regardless of this percentage connection, it's also equal to 643 days. And 643 is the 117th prime number, which is a very important prophetic number God uses in his science. The middle dividing chapter of the Bible is Psalms 117. Okay, so this chapter is the chapter that divides the Bible into an equal number of chapters on each side, before and after. The phrase, let it divide, that's repeated in the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, is equal to 117 in Hebrew gematria. I should say the phrase, let it divide in Hebrew, is equal to 117 in Hebrew gematria. Which of course refers to the dividing of night and day and the land from the water, etc. The year 117 AD divided ancient Rome's era of territorial expansion from its era of territorial contraction. In other words, Rome reached its maximum expansion in 117 AD. Which is the division, a dividing. The 101 pilgrims on the Mayflower divided themselves from the old world. And there's lots to that story. Not only did they escape religious persecution from the king when they fled to Holland, but then once they were in Holland for a few years, they realized that this wasn't going to work, because their children were being corrupted by the surrounding culture. Although they were tolerated as a religious sect in Holland, they still needed to divide themselves from the old world. They needed to depart. They needed to, in faith in God, get out of the old world in order to maintain their relationship with God. Just like the Israelites, they were escaping, dividing themselves. I don't have it in this paragraph, and so I'll say it here. Jesus said in Matthew 10:34, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace and unity in the world. I have come to bring division by the sword." There is a large percentage of Christians that do not get this, do not understand this. I'll repeat that. Jesus said, "Do not think that I came to bring unity. I came to bring division with the sword." What Jesus was saying, who was speaking for God, who was God in the flesh, is God's prerogative, God's plan with a capital P. This whole life, this whole creation is for the purpose of separating and distinguishing and dividing between, for example, good and evil, unrighteousness and righteousness. It's the place where we, with free will, which is why we are created in the image of God, get to choose between the two, between unrighteousness and righteousness, and whether or not to follow God and his ways or not. And this also applies to quote-unquote Christians. God is in the process, as we speak, of dividing and separating the true Christians from the not true Christians. The wheat and the tares, as it's described in the Bible. And I'll tell you, the main way he is going about doing that at this moment, the main symbolism for it, the main vehicle that is stirring the pot in order to divide, is Trump. If you are one of those Christians that don't understand what Jesus said when he meant, or when he said, do not think I have come to bring unity, but I have come to bring division, and you are against Trump and against the Christians that are for Trump, you are 100%, it's not, you are on the wrong side. You've been deceived. You have been greatly deceived. You are deceived. Whether it's been someone else or it's yourself, you've willingly been deceived. You never really got it. You never really understood Christianity. You never got it. You'll be saying, I hear these people because I'm one that listens to the other side to understand how they think. And I hear these quote-unquote Christians, and I hear them speak nonsense and lies and make friends with the left, the secular left. They're on, for example, the secular enemy shows. They're with the enemy, and they're communing with them, talking down about Christians that are for Trump. They're on the wrong side. Just that's in itself is evidence how they're friendly and with these people that are the enemy. But they'll say nonsense and they'll say lies. All of them. All of these quote-unquote Christians. The head of the Christianity Today website and magazine, for example, the New York Times that says something in itself, the columnist for the New York Times, the supposed, what does he call himself, a pastor or something, David French. These types, they're not Christians. They're liars. They're liars. They're wicked liars. I hear them. I could dissect them. If we were to go through a video and the things they were saying, I could stop and pause and explain to you how what they're saying might sound nice to those that are gullible and don't know very much or don't know the Bible well enough, etc. I could break it down for you, step by step, everything they say and how it's not true or it's a blatant lie. But it's all, and it's just tapping into emotions and feelings, which is what the left politics is about, right? Not actually about, deeper understanding about things, right? And they'll say, and they'll call the supporters of Trump haters, etc., when actually it's the left, it's the people they're speaking to that are the haters. But that's the classic thing that the left does. They accuse constantly of their enemy of doing the very thing that they are doing. You could take any example in recent years, and they are doing that very thing. For example, they will say that Trump is trying to shoplift the referendum when they, in fact, shoplifted the referendum. And they are collectively guilty for it because it's the media that did it. Because the media's responsibility is to get to the bottom of the matter and the truth and then report it. But we don't have media today. Journalism is political activism. And when I say they're collectively guilty of shoplifting the referendum, I literally mean it. God sees it that way. They're all guilty. Every one of them that smiles and eats that lie up with a big smile and enthusiastically agrees with it that they didn't shoplift the referendum. Without taking 1 minute to hear the other side and look at one shred of the evidence for which there is a mountain of overwhelming evidence. It's all a complete lie from Satan, and I'm wanting to drive home here. If you've somehow managed to get to this channel and this video, and you are a quote-unquote Christian that is either on the left, which is an oxymoron, or you are someone who has sympathy with the anti-Trumpers, you are lost. You are a terror. It is time to repent. The prediction being made in this video will prove what I am saying. That is the purpose of this prediction. So when the prediction comes to pass, please reassess everything you think you know. You do not know nearly enough. And it's because you love lies. And here's the thing that's primarily important here. Never will you hear these quote-unquote Christians talk about evil or fighting evil. They'll always talk about loving your neighbor. And that's why they'll claim that the Trumpers they don't talk serious things. There's no meat to anything they say, right? But they'll talk about how, conservatives are haters. It's, how that's a lie. But also they're the haters. They're the racists. They'll call the conservatives racist. They are the racists. They're the ones that are focused on race, right? With identity politics and DEI, etc. It's all communism, and its purpose is to divide the races. They're the racists, right? So, but anyway, you'll never hear them talk about fighting evil. It's all about loving your neighbor, loving your neighbor. They'll say, they'll make hollow statements about following Jesus, the cross, right? But they don't know what they're talking about, right? And they don't, the point what I'm trying to make is that Jesus is very, very concerned about evil and fighting evil, and there are two classes of people. The truth is that there are two classes of people: those that hate evil and fight evil, and those that don't hate evil and fight those that do fight evil. And that's the left. And that's why, if you take a second look at these people and listen to them again, you'll never hear them talk about the evil they don't even recognize the evil of our day, which is so dark. But if you aren't with God, you will not recognize the times that we are in. Well, okay, I maybe you take that back. They'll say it's dark, but because it's Trump. Actually, it's because of the people fighting evil. But like I'm saying, there are two classes of people, and they're the ones that are fighting those who are trying to fight evil. And they're on the wrong side. And I'll just leave it at that. And so, what I was getting at here, though, is how this percentage is also a 117th prime number connection, which is symbolic of division in God's signs. And as I was saying, the territory of Rome expanded and contracted at the year 117 AD. That's more significant than it might seem, because the Antichrist, the first of the two, is Pope Francis. And Roman Catholicism is the worst thing that happened to Christianity in history. Well, actually, it was all part of God's plan. It's part of, again, the process of dividing. Satan has his strategies, which, God uses Satan for the fleshing out of what we were talking about, right? The contrast between good and evil is requiring evil. So God places us in this world where there is Satan, the ruler of this world, and obviously he's going to have a strategy. And obviously, if you think about it, one of the strategies would be to create this mass religion where everyone in the nation is a member of, and everyone's a Christian. There's no division there. That's Catholicism. It was designed specifically to bring in every single person for reasons such as greed or whatever, but also spiritually, the bigger picture spiritual reason is to fool the masses into thinking that they're all right by doing the things that Catholics do and not what the Bible says, right? That's the bottom line. So that's another reason why it's relevant that the number 117 would show up in terms of ancient Rome. But just to finish this now, the 101 pilgrims on the Mayflower divided themselves from the old world. The serial number of the propeller of the Titanic is 101, and when it sank, the passengers who were saved in the lifeboats, symbolic of Christ, were divided from those who went to a watery grave at the bottom of the ocean. Now, of course, this is only symbolism. I'm not saying that those that went to the bottom and were the sinners and those that were on the life. Obviously, if you have a mind that's older than 5 years old, you probably didn't even need me to say that, right? So that's this symbolism for this division. The lifeboats, Christ, and the watery grave. It's the bottomless pit. It's Sheol in the Old Testament. That's what's symbolized with the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean there. It's all symbolism. It's amazing symbolism. This would anyway be why it would be relevant to connect this Titanic sign, which is about division, because again, I'll just repeat one last time, the Titanic was symbolic of the Mayflower, which was symbolic of the pilgrims dividing themselves from the old world. That's why they left. They needed to get away from the others. It wasn't because, well, you know what, let's go and find some new wealth. No, it was spiritual. They needed to live out their religion, their faith, in a place where they could do it and also have it carry on to the next generation. Because although they were able to live in peace from the government in Holland, they were not going to be successful. So they needed to start fresh. They needed to go to the promised land, which was all along God's design. So this video here, this is truly an epic video. Make sure you share this video with everyone you know and don't stop sharing it, especially when the prediction comes to pass for the predicted bombs on March 22nd in New York City, Manhattan, where the Titanic was headed. And I think I've said everything here. God bless. In the account of the flood in the Bible, well, first of all, this video is predicting that 2 dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan, in New York City, and there will be a large-scale evacuation on March 22nd, 2025. The date that this video is posted proves this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this email, which I showed at the beginning of the video, the timestamp. Okay, so in the account of the flood in the Bible, 7 plus 7 plus 7 animals are loaded onto the ark. It's symbolism. It's this repetition of 7 3 times. In God's signs and in the Bible, God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The Titanic that sank on its maiden voyage is an antitype for Noah's Ark. The imploded wreck of the Ocean Gate submersible was discovered next to the Titanic on June 22nd, 2023. Exactly 7 plus 7 plus 7 months before the predicted explosions in New York City on March 22nd, 2025. In the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gates, or the gate. And also the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. The name Ocean Gate hints at this. And its wreckage was discovered 7 plus 7 plus 7 months before the predicted collapse of security in Manhattan on March 22nd, probably on Wall Street. Probably at least one of the 2 bombs will explode on Wall Street. And again, the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment after a symbolic 3 sets of 7 in the Bible. To further provide detail here, the ark, of course, is part of the story of the flood, and the sinking of the Titanic is also symbolic of that, a flooding. A significant part of the media coverage of the missing Titanic submersible included interviews of the director of the movie Titanic, James Cameron, whose hobby is deep water submersibles. Cameron said that the owner of the Ocean Gate sub, whom he knew, would not listen to the warnings regarding the safety of his sub. Similarly, America is not listening to the prophetic warnings from God and will soon be wrecked. Cameron wrote and directed the movie The Abyss. He directed Titanic and also the movie The Abyss, which is about aliens who rise from the bottom of the ocean. This and the Titanic graveyard at the bottom of the ocean is symbolic of the Bible prophecy that describes demons rising from the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9. These demons will pretend to be aliens. Which is a test for primarily quote-unquote Christians. There are many Christians, quote-unquote Christians today, that claim or would say that they are open-minded regarding the existence of aliens on other planets, which means they are not Christian. Because in the biblical worldview, the world is the center of the universe, the center of God's creation is earth, and the center of God's creation is man. And God became a man and died for the sins of men on a cross. He did not hopscotch around the universe, dying on crosses as other alien species, dying for sins of other alien races. There are no aliens. And even the scientific evidence now, I mean, we've come a long way since the 1970s when Carl Sagan would say something like, the universe is so big, there must be aliens everywhere. We now know more, and it's the analysis from atheist scientists, astronomers, conclude that it's actually quite possible and maybe even likely that this is the only place in the universe where intelligent life exists. And they extrapolate that based on the numbers, based on the things that are required for an opportunity for intelligent life to evolve on a planet. Things like the Goldilocks zone in the right type of star, which eliminates so many other stars, just that alone. And things like Jupiter and being the gravitational planet for comets, and the moon. The moon had to be the right size and everything too. And the moon came from a planet that came before the Earth and the moon that was split into two and all this. I mean, it just goes on and on. Anyway, the point is that I shouldn't even have gotten into it. It's not even required to give any scientific evidence at all. You are not a Christian if you think that it's possible that aliens exist on another planet. It's amazing how many quote-unquote Christians believe that. Because Christ is Jesus, is God as a man. And anyway, there are actually also theologians today that aren't Christian that are doing their best to bridge the theology with somehow incorporating the existence of aliens. Which is why when they did a study, there was a professor at a university that did a study, and the conclusion was that all of the Christian denominations would be accepting of aliens if they were to, arrive, for example. If came out that there was proof that there was aliens, all of the Christian denominations would be accepting of that news, except for the fundamentalists. And why is that? It's because of exactly what I said at the beginning. God is using this deception of aliens to weed out the true Christians from the non-true Christians. Because again, you are not a Christian if you think that there's aliens. And when the demons come pretending to be aliens and the majority of quote-unquote Christians go along with it, it's part of the process of weeding out, dividing the wheat from the tares, as Jesus said. Now, so that's what's going to happen. So anyway, we have a connection between the Titanic submersible explosion sign or implosion through James Cameron, who directed the Titanic, but also the movie Abyss, The Abyss, which is about submersibles. Because Cameron's hobby is submersibles, but the movie The Abyss is about submersibles. I think I read that it was by the actors saying that it was the most difficult movie to film in history. God uses extremes like that for his signs. What I was saying here too is that this movie, The Abyss, is about aliens at the bottom of the ocean. And that's also what the Titanic is about, the bottom of the ocean. And in the extended version of the movie, The Abyss, which is a big part of the movie, The Abyss, I mean, there's an extended version that has a completely different ending, and it's famous. It's not, it's not obscure. So anyway, there's a version of The Abyss that's a legitimate, non-obscure version, an official version, that has the aliens here to help humanity with their nuclear weapons. Which is why this story that involves the imploded Titanic submersible and James Cameron, because again, this story of the Titanic submersible that imploded truly does involve James Cameron. He was in the news daily speaking with the media and making his comments because he's like the leading figure in the submersible community. Okay, so anyway, this story involves the imploded Titanic submersible and James Cameron, and it connects to the predicted explosion of the nuclear material bombs in Manhattan, and that's how it all ties together. Because again, James Cameron makes this movie about the bottom of the ocean and aliens, which is where all of this is ultimately heading. It's why the bombs will be on the date 322, for example, because it points to Genesis 3:22, which regards immortality of man without God, and that's what the demons pretending to be aliens will promise humanity through the mark of the Antichrist. They'll promise reversal of aging and immortality without God. Long story short, but that's how it all ties together. So this is all relevant with this connection to James Cameron and the aliens at the bottom of the ocean through the movie The Abyss, which also in its extended version involves nuclear weapons. And again, we are expecting a nuclear material bombs to explode in Manhattan. Okay? And again, the discovery of the imploded submersible was exactly 7 + 7 + 7 months before the predicted explosion and evacuation. And again, the Titanic is about an evacuation. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.